I used to call it the cutter that would take over me and cut my skin. Once I met that part, renamed it with my name, recognized it was a little kid inside me who had dealt with a lot of trauma, I was able to love that little being back to life. And now that part of me is a beloved part that helps with my painting and drawing and is an integral part of my life. And that's how I know I won't cut again, is because I finally listened to what the cutter was trying to say.
Welcome to the Persistence You podcast with Lisbeth. That's you as in university, but we're really much more of a community here. Lisbeth Meredith is an author, speaker, and online teacher. Each week, she'll be delivering amazing stories from survivors and strivers, all threaded together with a dose of persistence. We're so glad you're listening.
For sisters and brothers, I am really looking forward to today's conversation. It is a very serious one about self-harm and adults. And so I am thrilled to have Maggie Parr with us today. She is the author of a new book that she'll tell us about. When we talk on Persistence U, as ever, whether it's about someone's medical experience with a medical crisis or a mental health crisis, whatever, please keep in mind this is one person's story. This is not therapeutic advice. I definitely recommend for adults or teenagers who have issues regarding self-harm that they see a professional clinician and not go through anything alone, because they are not alone. So absolutely enjoy this episode and enjoy Maggie. And thanks as ever for being here. And yes, we will get started. Maggie Parr, welcome to Persistence U today. And I am really so very honored that you're here. And I talked a little bit about the topic that we'll speak on, which is self-harm in adulthood. Not something we typically think about, because I've raised teenagers, I've worked with juvenile delinquents in my past history. And most of us talk about self-harming behaviors, we think angsty teens and always girls. And so that's not always the case. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it reached a head for you and you decided to do the work that you did recently and share your experience?
Yes, I actually did start as a preteen. I really started at 4, but I switched to razor blades at 12. And I finally told an adult at 14, but it stayed with me throughout my life. And I had a big relapse again in my 40s as I was going through a divorce in a previous relationship. And I didn't find anything out there for adults. I mean, this is the beginning of online groups, and I found a group, and there were a few people on there who talked about their grandchildren or how hard it was with their partner. But there was no book, no therapist didn't know about it. So that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book I had wanted to read at the time to help me, because I wanted to help others once I found my way through into recovery.
Isn't it silly that we don't even realize, like, these problems don't just dissipate once we have an 18th birthday.
Right.
Nothing magically resolves with
Or
those
we go to
18
therapy
candles.
once.
Right. And there are certain issues in life, and I imagine this is one of them, that truly are lifelong struggles.
Yeah.
That we have periods of remission like you've had,
Right.
or we struggle ongoing. So good for you for really shining a light on that. Very few of us are talking about self-harming in adults.
That's why I called it the creator's guide to stopping self-harm instead of stopping cutting, because just cutting, I think, would put people off or would be narrow the field. But it doesn't matter what our particular thing is. We all have a form of self-harm that we picked up to survive childhood.
It's true. It's very true. And there comes I think we need comfort and we need something to help in times of high stress, especially I think it's not always true, but if you're a high achiever, and I feel like that's been you, and you have to it feels like you need something to take that edge off and have a release.
Yes.
And again, when we were talking, I feel like, yes, binge eating has been a problem for me all my life, but I've gotten a much better handle on it as I've gotten older. I think of that as a form of definitely of self-harm, not just an eating disorder. But yeah, things like cutting and other
Yeah.
things that people do. Some people uh,
Pull their hair,
pull their hair
trick-or-treating.
out. So tell us a little bit about your life when there was a long period of remission of these symptoms, but you had a really interesting high stress career, I would imagine, and then it started again.
I've always had high stress career because I put the stress on myself.
Mhm.
I was designing, I've been a freelancer for 35, like maybe 30 years because I realized early on that I wasn't great working 8 to 5 at a company, but I worked for Disney Imagineering for a long time. And then they were my largest client, and I designed things with teams, by myself. Um, but it was strange in my 40s because I knew it was an issue. I had struggled through it through most of my 20s, and I found that it wasn't just young women, it was men as well. I knew a lot of other guys in my high school, and I've met a lot since. And in the statistics, I have found that it's almost half men, the people in who do self-harm.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, and from all socioeconomic and ethnic backgrounds, and in not just America. I was researching all the statistics and applying them to current populations, and there's about 14 million people roughly in the US alone. And this is increasing during the pandemic, and it's they've done studies of every continent has this issue. Maybe almost 15% of the human population has done some form of cutting or burning themselves. But it's a
Wow.
lot more widespread. It just so happens that the books and the harrowing memoirs have been done by young women,
Right.
but I'm on a crusade to let people know about this. And the more I tell people, the more people come to me and say, "Oh, I have a granddaughter," or "My daughter, I have a friend of mine's daughter just started." And so you never know. Now, I personally asked about my life, and I had this period of remission where my life was going well. I've clean and sober as well. I've been almost 33 years, and my life got better. I had what felt like a good marriage, but the marriage started to fall apart, and I hadn't realized how much my childhood traumas had affected me. So it all came to a head, and next thing I knew, I was cutting myself at 43, 44 years old. I ended up in an urgent care because of secondary burns to my arm, because I'm not gonna go into details. I don't
Sure.
trigger anybody, but it was bad, and I was lying to the doctor about what happened, and I just thought, this is bad. I was in therapy at the time, and I just needed a change. I needed to get out of that relationship, which had become very toxic, and I needed time to myself. And so
And
I took yes, go ahead.
Maggie, do you mean the relationship with your therapist became toxic or your
Oh, I'm
relationship?
so sorry.
Okay.
Yes. No,
Okay.
my relationship with my partner, my life partner.
Okay. Great. Okay.
Yes, that therapist, I'm still with her. She's amazing. I'm jumping around a bit, but when I relapsed in the cutting, I went back to therapy.
Okay.
I was
Good.
working with someone and realized that my 20-year marriage was no longer working.
Okay.
So I had to get out of that and get help. I lived in my friend's daughter's pink room, old room, overlooking an alley for 15 months and cried my eyes out, and worked on therapy, worked on my sobriety, worked on the things that I had not faced. And what I realized about the cutting didn't go away right away, but it was through this therapy and through my creativity. I'm an artist. I started realizing that it's a voice on the skin, and I needed to listen to what it was trying to tell me. And then when I did that and started using my artwork to express what was happening, I was able to get that part back, meet that part of me. I used to call it the cutter that would take over me and cut my skin. Once I met that part, renamed it with my name, recognized it was a little kid inside me who had dealt with a lot of trauma, I was able to love that little being back to life. And now that part of me is a beloved part that helps with my painting and drawing and is an integral part of my life. And that's how I know I won't cut again, is because I finally listened to what the cutter was trying to say and realized it was me. And I needed to love myself. So I've gone from self-harm to self-love, and I'm want to help other people do the same.
I like that. That's wonderful. Did you go, so after therapy, did you decide you'd want to coach people or you just want to help them through your writing? Like, how are you?
Right now, it's just writing.
Okay.
I make a living as an artist, and I'm pretty busy with that, commission
Sure.
designs and things. But my whole sobriety, I've helped other people coached people, not coached, but sponsored people
Sure.
and I wanted to see if I could do this in some way because I've gotten through this and I want to help other people. And that's simply it. And I'm not a therapist, so I wouldn't feel comfortable charging. I'm not a life coach. But writing the book was the first step to getting this information out there. I'm just starting to do some more podcasts and talks, and I think it will evolve as I go along. But I'm still in therapy. It's evolved quite a bit so that I'm not obviously in crisis or trauma anymore. Now I'm working more deeply on my spirituality and how I move about in the world. I got into another relationship with somebody and I needed time away from that relationship to heal, so we stopped living together, and then eventually I realized, I'm ready, so
Hmm.
the healing does work. I wanna tell people that it does work. If you start working on yourself, you will heal. You may or may not stay married, you may or may not keep your job, but wherever you end up will be absolutely better than before because this is the most important work we can do is healing ourselves.
Excellent. And art for you has always been a big way to express yourself.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that is fantastic. Do you envision someday that you'll have like group support maybe and or art therapy? I mean, what are your thoughts? Like what
Yes,
you're planning?
I would love to do group workshops. If I were more together, I could say, "Yes, go to this website and here you'll get the
Okay.
help you need." But, I do have a website called stoppingselfharm.com, but that's evolving, and what I'm always thinking of how can this truly help people? And I think maybe if I develop something online that people could come and try different exercises and learn what works, what worked for me. The book doesn't have just creative exercises. It has grounding techniques, visualizations, all kinds of tips to be able to help people on their journey. But it really is guiding people on a journey because it's a quest. It's a walk deep into yourself, and I recommend everybody have a therapist and a guide, but I have prompts and I use my creativity to help me, and I think it can help other people, whether they're artists or not. Creativity is our human birthright, and part of getting in touch with this self-harming part is getting in touch with the little kid who doesn't care what people think about their drawing, but needs drawing to be able to express themselves. So I think drawing and painting and sculpting and those things are so crucial to heal the little ones inside.
That's lovely. And for those of us who might not be self-harming as adults, but might have friends who are, what are some ways that we can first kind of see the signs and be supportive?
Yeah, you either see it or you don't. It's amazing. I have scars all up and down my arms, and I can count on one hand the number of people who ever mentioned it, even in the summer when I had short sleeves on. And I think people are nervous about it, or I had people have asked me if I was on dialysis or all kinds of things, but it doesn't occur to people that that's what it's from. But if you do see it and you notice it, like I see it in other people, and I'll say, that must have been really hard.
Mhm.
You doing okay? And they can choose to say something or not. For me, I mean, we think it's just all about getting attention, but most people hide it and they'll talk about it when they're ready. But when it's a case of someone like with a kid or someone who's actively struggling, I would say make sure they have professional help if you can suggest that. And then just say, can I be here and listen? Do you want to talk? If I'm actually working with someone who's self-harming, I will suggest that they draw a picture of the being that is doing the cutting or burning. And it's amazing how even non-artists, especially non-artists can just do it. They know that being lives inside them. And then I
Mhm.
have them draw what's that being's higher power, their safe hero or champion who keeps them safe. And that's another exercise that makes you realize that that being has their own higher power and can reach out to them when they're struggling. And those two things seem to really help people, at least through the moment.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
What has the response been like since you wrote this book? You wrote basically a guidebook. What have you heard?
I've heard positive things from people. As you know, I poured my heart and soul into it, and I worked. People are enjoying the non-cutters are enjoying getting to know me better. So there's that personal aspect. I was afraid people might judge it or think, "Ooh, I didn't know that about you," but it's been nothing but positive. People appreciate you being honest about who you are. And then it's sort of like making the rounds. I'm not doing a whole lot of promotion yet, but it's making rounds in our little town. People have said, "Oh, I heard about your book, and it inspired me to start a new art series." It's like, oh, okay. Another one, people are reaching out to me who have children who are struggling. Someone reached out to me from England. And so I'm findable online, and when people need something, they'll reach out, and I do my best to be available.
I like that. Maggie, where can people find you, find out about your work a little bit more in depth, and learn about your book? What's the best way?
I would say go to stoppingselfharm.com specifically for the book. And if you wanted to see my artwork and design history and the carousels and paintings and things that I've designed, you'd go to maggieparr.com. That has all my,
Okay.
yes.
The Two Different Lives of Maggie Parr.
Yes, this story of my life, two different lives, always. From working at Disney and cheerful, and then I had these scars on my arm that I hid. And this
Oh,
book is about becoming one person and presenting that to the world in service. So
I like that. I like that. The Two Different Lives of Maggie Parr. That's very, very poignant.
that's the next book.
Yeah, but it's something to think about because I think we all do that to a certain extent. There's the game face that we have, telling
Yes.
people everything's great and fine, whatever. And then there's the real life.
Right.
And you just expressed yours in a way that was different than what people expect from adults, but that is happening.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
I'm
we all
glad
have
you're
kids
shining.
living inside us. Hate to say it.
Right. Right.
But
Exactly
no one is
right.
going to protect and love them except us. And the wound holds the answer. And we need to go in, find out what it's trying to say, and heal it ourselves.
I think that's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I really look forward to hearing how listeners receive this information too. And
Yeah.
congratulations. And I love if people are on YouTube, they can see behind you some of your artwork.
Yes, the series is called Dangerous Angels. And
Oh my.
it's tied a lot to the self-harming, in that our most valuable angels are not always these light, bright, loving, angelic creatures. They're the hard lessons in life, the ones who scare us. And if we can
Right.
embrace them, then we learn so much more, and they can become our angels.
Well, it looks like you've done that. It really has been
Same
wonderful
here.
to meet
Thank
you. Thank you for being here today.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's show. Thank you so much for listening. Now, to find out more, head on over to lameredith.com and be sure to hop on the mailing list too. If you've enjoyed this show, please leave a rating and review or share with a friend. And if you really, really liked it, go ahead and subscribe so that you never miss another episode. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Persistence U with Lisbeth.